So I'd like to take the opportunity to thank everybody for coming on today. I also would really like to thank Brad for his time. I know that I've got several meetings in his calendar over the next few weeks, including 2 already today. So thank you very much for coming on and giving a little bit of clarity around some of the financial situations that are going on and some of the services that are being offered. I'd like to take this opportunity to first off acknowledge that we are meeting, even though virtually, on the ceded territories of the First Nations of the Coast Salish peoples in our area. And I'd also like to just give a quick acknowledgement to all of our first responders, medical workers, front lines, those that are out there keeping the rest of us all safe and up and running. So thank you to everybody that's working out there right now. I am going to turn it over to Brad. He's going to talk a little bit about sort of startup on some of the programs. One of the number one ones that was just been released, of course, yesterday is the wage subsidy program for the 75%. So I think that's sort of a how, what, where, when, and why, and who's accessible, and sort of any ins and outs you may know, Brad, that might help people out.
Certainly, and thanks again for having me on. So yeah, I mean, yesterday was obviously a big day. The applications, I think, officially rolled in, and there were hundreds of thousands and anticipated millions of them over the coming weeks from the government. So that was a big plan. I mean, I don't know if everybody remembers the day that Trudeau got up on his podium outside his house and announced both the amendment from the 10% wage subsidy to 75%, that along with the $40,000 small business loans. That was the day I sat on the couch and said, oh, they're doing something for business, finally. Like, you know, it's been, not to say that, you know, we as people don't need it personally to help as well, but I said all the relief thus far, it felt like it was to help, you know, in our consumer lives as opposed to businesses. Meanwhile, you know, businesses across the country were shutting their doors and laying off employees, and, you know, sitting there with just this unknown of what does the next little while look like. So that program, I think, is fantastic. I still think there's some holes in it that hopefully are going to be, you know, amended and changed. The other piece that maybe we can chat about is the commercial rent subsidy that came out just a few days ago. That's obviously a hot topic right now. So the wage subsidy, and Colleen, I know you're just as well versed, so correct me if I miss anything. Things seem to be changing almost on the daily, getting updated. So but yeah, 75% wage subsidy for those impacted with 30% revenue decline. There are a number of ways to calculate that 30% decrease, which has kind of been an interesting hot topic that's evolved both on year-over-year basis, whether you're comparing last year's March to this year's March, and also you're able to compare January and February of this year versus March, and then obviously forward April and May. So applicants are able to qualify independently from a month-to-month basis and submit that application. I think it's on 15-day rolling periods, actually. So it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out and when the money actually hits everyone's accounts. They'd originally said by the middle of May, and have echoed that it's apparently coming in May. We haven't applied ourselves at our firm, and none of our customers have applied and been approved and processed and paid yet. So I can't comment exactly on when that's going to happen, but the hope is throughout this month. Now that's obviously backdated all the way to the middle of March, which is great, because those employers that have already paid for employees and through that period are going to be getting a good chunk back, and hopefully those that have laid people off have the ability to bring people back as well. So yeah, that's obviously a good program. Again, I still think some holes. You know, we were chatting this morning, calling on the call, and some of the large retailers that they maybe have certain divisions where they've laid off many employees, whereas another division is doing okay, that as a whole, their revenue may be down, you know, only 20-25%. However, there are certain divisions that are absolutely decimated, right? So maybe there'll be some tweaks that the government's able to do there. And then there's obviously caps, right, on both wage amounts and totals as a company as well. So
and I overall, think just to be clear on that, when you were saying about how you calculate for the 30%, whether it's with the January, February numbers or last year, you can't change that midstream. However you're going to calculate it is how you're going to do it moving forward. So really take a look at that.
Can't look and say, well, April year over year went down, but March versus January and February wasn't down. So it's got to be consistent.
And it's being clear when you start, because once you start, you can't go back and change it. So
exactly. I do want to talk about one of the best programs I think out there, the $40,000 loan subsidy or loan program. So it's being administered through just business chartered banks. So all the financial institutions, both banks and credit unions, they've all got their individual online applications. We've walked a number of clients through it, and it is seamless. It's a declaration. You have to declare that COVID has in fact impacted your ability to operate as a business owner. You have to use the funds for whether it's wages, fixed costs. It's not the $40,000 loan. I've got a lot of calls. Is not to take it out and go invest in the stock market and take the 25% forgiveness from the government. So on that note, the program is set up. It's $40,000. It's interest free all the way through till next year's December. So 2021, December 31st, it's interest free. At that point in time, if you fully repay the loan, then they forgive $10,000 of it. So if you've advanced $40,000, effectively, if you repay $30,000 by then you'll get the other $10,000 forgiven. If you aren't or don't have the ability to fully repay it by then simply it'll term out into a 3-year loan from that period forward at a 5% interest rate, again, through your institution. So most of the banks and credit unions, if you're just logged into your own business banking, there'll be a link that says COVID relief and then the funding program relief, and you can apply through there. It's a pretty simple, seamless application. And I've heard of banks funding the next day all the way to 3 or 4 business days later. So certainly within a week, most of the banks and credit unions are having those funds just directly deposited into your bank account for use, whether it's to cover rent or utilities, wages, that type of thing. They're not for subsidy of business owner dividends, is one of the things they're pretty clear on. The other side of that, which is, I think, the unfortunate piece of that program, is that it was nice that they opened up the qualifying range in terms of T4 income that you have to have paid your employees in 2019 fiscal calendar year. Sorry, it was originally 50,000. They've knocked it down to 20,000, and they've increased it up to 1.5 million. So it captures a little bit larger customer, but obviously with payroll between 20 and 1.5 million, and the amount being 40,000, it is geared towards small business owners. The unfortunate piece of it is it has to be T4 income as of right now. So business owners, myself included, you have the ability to tax plan accordingly with your accountant and pay yourself and your business partners and spouses and whatnot that are involved in the business in T5s, meaning dividends, or T4, meaning employment. And there's certain tax implications, obviously, and CPP implications and other implications of doing it either way. Unfortunately, as of today, a business owner that's a solopreneur that has their own shop and has paid themselves dividends doesn't qualify.
And you'd say, as of today, that's one of the big things that the Canadian Chamber, BC Chamber, and other business organizations have been pushing for.
Exactly.
Yeah. So.
And that that just highlights the importance, right? It to the government could seem like a small problem, and those creating the policies think, oh well, dividends is extra income, right? But a lot of business owners just pay themselves purely dividends because they're either they. Oh, I don't need to get into the reasons, but yeah. So yeah, that's a big program that anyone that has been affected, I think it's a great opportunity to go apply for that through your bank, and you can reach out obviously to your own banker, and they should be able to facilitate that. All the banks are doing it online though. They're not obviously taking in-person applications. They don't want people storming into the branch, so it's got to be done online. I can share with you, Colleen, we've got a list of all the different banks, their specific websites that
we've actually shared that on our COVID page. The information that
Perfect.
you've given us, it is listed there. There's links for almost all the banks that bank out of the Langley area for people to click on through the langleychamber.com. So
perfect. Yeah, another one that's come up a lot is obviously BDC, Business Development Bank of Canada. They've been designated by the federal government as a key piece of the funding for businesses in the coming months. So they have 2 programs right now. One of them is a pure working capital program. So it was the first one that was announced. It's got to be done obviously through the bank, through BDC. They're encouraging people to do it online if possible. It's a $2 million cap, so maximum per business. It is specifically for working capital. So the idea of the application is that you as a business owner are going to have to look at your forecast, your cash flow for the next 6 months, and all your fixed costs that are going to, you know, cut into your working capital that you cannot avoid paying. This loan is there to try to keep the lights on. So combination of wages, you know, your utilities, your rent, you've got, you know, all sorts of things. Exactly, right? So all different things like that. The working capital, that's what this loan is for. So you'd apply through BDC. The max is $2 million. Currently, the rate is BDC's base rate minus 1.75. So that equates to 2.8%. I've heard rumblings and that it's going up though, May 1st. And simply it's because they've found a lot of the applications they've been getting have been people that don't need the money, but are going, holy cow, 2.8%. What a fantastic rate. Like, let's get that money and we can, you know, invest it in the stock market or whatever. So as much as I'm always a driver of my business, what we do is try to get, you know, our customers the lowest rates possible. There's a part of me that actually feels that that loan was almost a little too cheap because it was enticing the wrong sorts of activities. So it's going to be going up apparently a little bit. The structure of that loan is that it's a 36-month total term. So if you were to borrow day one, the way that it works is the first 12 months is interest only. So you only pay interest on the loan. So if you get yourself, you know, $1 million, you're just going to pay the interest on that $1 million for the first 12 months. The next 24 months, so the last 2 years of the term, you have to term out 40% of the loan. So if you borrowed $1 million in years 2 and year 3, you would effectively be paying off 40% of the loan. So you would pay off $400,000. So you can think of it as you almost got 2 loans. You got one loan for $600,000 for 60% of it, and you got another loan for 40% of it for $400,000. Both loans are interest only for the first 12 months. The next loan for $600,000 stays interest only for the next 2 years, but the loan for $400,000 will be paid off entirely over the next 2 years. Okay. And then at the very end, so that at the end of the 3-year period, the remaining 60% is all due. So it's called basically a balloon payment or a bullet payment, where the balance of that loan is due. Now, at that point in time, the thought is that businesses would have enough money to then lump it down and pay it out, or maybe even themselves would pay it off kind of voluntarily over the second half of the loan. However, if it is still outstanding, then there's the opportunity at that point for BDC to either renew the loan, term it out over another 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, depending on, you know, the situation, or obviously your primary institution, your RBCs, BMOs, you know, credit unions of the world, to pay it out themselves if businesses don't have the resources. So again, it's a good program. It's geared towards, again, covering working capital costs to keep the lights on for businesses through these tough times. Not perfect for everyone by all means. And it's, again, kind of geared towards that small to medium sized business with a cap of $2 million total funding. BDC's also been given, there's another program which is more towards growth, where they can actually fund up to $6.25 million. And it's more towards they've basically been allocated more money that, not that it has looser approval terms than normal, but where they've been told to take more like COVID, take the impact of COVID into account and not punish businesses for that happening. So more so, again, approving based on how businesses did prior to COVID and how they expect to do post-COVID. And those funds are geared towards more growth capital. So, and ongoing working capital and that type of thing.
So for instance, somebody who's in manufacturing that's needing to retool to change what they're doing and they need to buy equipment, that would be the perfect example of how
exactly, right? Or just something simply, you know, a trucking company that's picked up a new contract and needs fleet, right? Needs some new vehicles or, you know, trucks and trailers or whatever. It's more for general business, doesn't have to be specifically for working capital, whereas the other one is structured purely for that. In combination with that, EDC has also been, you know, a lot of money has been backed to EDC, Export Development Canada. Traditionally, Export Development Canada can only support exporters. So businesses had to truly be exporting their products. Right now for this program, that condition's been waived. So true, pure domestic customers can be supported by EDC. So effectively, Export Development Canada's role is they provide almost like an insurance, a guarantee to the financial institution. So you would go through your existing bank. Same with the $6 million from BDC. The applications can be started through your existing bank. And the bank can then determine, hey, we'd actually like to bring in BDC as a partner on this, or we'd like to bring in EDC as a guarantor or partner on this facility. And Export Development Canada then will guarantee 80% of the loan exposure from the bank. So if they're, the bank's offering out $1 million, 80% of it is guaranteed by EDC, meaning the bank's risk exposure is the only remaining 20%. So with that in mind, I mean, the banks still aren't throwing money, at just out the window, but they're making more favorable decisions, I'd call it, given the market circumstances. Loans that they would certainly be saying no to, given all the market circumstances, is they are saying, you know what, we really like the business, we like where you were before, we like where you're going, it's good management, good style. Let's bring in EDC as a partner, hopefully for short term over the next couple of years, get through this transition, and then the bank ultimately would be able to either remove the guarantee or pay out BDC and kind of bring everything back in-house. So those are kind of the primary programs. You had mentioned retooling. So there are some unique, not even financing, but grants out there. And I'm not a grant specialist by any means. I'm not the person to call for that, but I would advise everybody, if you are retooling your factory or doing anything that is specifically geared towards COVID relief, talk to your accountant. Many of the accountants have specific programs similar to like SHRED programs, where if you're doing research and development, you can get grants back for the government. There are certain programs out there that have always been there that would apply for situations like this, but there are other programs like Next Gen that basically will fund your equipment costs, your retooling costs, those types of things, in an effort to, as a country, to combat the COVID problem here. So that would be like obviously a bit quick ramble, high level summary of the different programs that are going on. Most of the banks and credit unions as well that we've dealt with, they are supportive of existing customers. If you've been an existing, just a deposit customer, you've never borrowed before, always been, a good business in the past, and COVID's impacted you. There are different small business programs that banks have right now. Most banks, not all, and most credit unions and banks, but a lot of them will approve lines of credit, typically between 10 and 15% of your revenue, of your annual revenue. You've got to produce your last couple of years of year-end statements from your accountant. But most of the time, if you've been profitable in the past and irrespective of the COVID impact, and you fully expect to continue business after COVID or through COVID, and get back to normal, whatever that normal is, but become profitable again, the banks do have lines of credits and stuff like that can be requested, and we've seen a lot of them approved through all different banks.
From whom a lot of the different businesses I've spoken to, they said the number one thing is communication with your current financiers. First stop, that would be your first stop. Go have that conversation of where you're sitting and what you can do to move forward, and then look at the different programs and what they've got available. I think communication is key at this point, being open and honest with your banker and saying, this is what I need.
100%. Transparency. I mean, in all times, number one thing we say is, there's nothing, you should hide nothing from your bank. They're trying to help you. They are there to do business as well. They want to loan money. They want to do these things. If you're open and transparent, and you've in your mind made the decision, hey, like, we've got a solution for this. We're a business and we're moving through. Share the problem, share the solution, like be transparent, but especially in times like this. Yeah. The other piece is go to your banker prepared, especially if you're going to BDC. They are so swamped right now with payment deferrals, skip a payment options, interest only, opportunities. So they are so busy that if you can do the work ahead of time, they ultimately are going to have to request, if you can speak, I guess, about payment deferrals and interest only options, where most banks have given that level of authority to the regional managers. They don't have to go to credit, upper credit approvals, because the credit departments are so swamped right now as well, that they can approve both 10% bulges, you'd call it, so an increase to your line of credit by 10%, or skip a payment, deferral payments, or interest only options at a regional level. It all, again, has to make sense. Banks just don't throw money around and make decisions that aren't sound. That's why we've got such a stable, strong banking system in Canada. But they can do it at a regional level. That said, they still have to obviously backtrack with all the information and the reasoning and the support to why they're making that decision. So if you can do that ahead of time, which is a big part of what we've been doing for people, if you can draft out and effectively do the work for the bank, saying, hey, this is where we were before. This is how it's impacted us. This is how we plan to get through it. This is what we need the money for. This is why you should give us the money effectively. You've done their work for them. It makes, number one, their life a lot easier. Number two, you're going to get the response so much faster. It's always important to give all the information and give them as much tool, as many tools and ammunition, as we'll call it, as possible. But now it's more important than ever, just because of the backlogs that exist in the banks.
I agree. It's definitely being prepared, especially even when you're dealing with CRA, with any of the systems or anything going up. If you've got everything in front of you when you go in, it's going to speed up the process. And that's another thing to say is be patient. Be patient with everybody when you're doing these processes. We all need it more than ever, fast and quick, but there's only so many people behind the screens that are trying to do stuff. I think CRA has been slammed. And I think the best sort of overview of that is most big projects and things like that over the years have taken 3 and 4 years of discussion, 2 and 3 years of rollout. And we've had days of discussion and weeks of rollout. So there is going to be holes, gaps, and things that need to be filled. But I think working forward, we can find those. I think as we come up with them, it's just getting the information to the right people.
Sure.
When I carry on with some of the questions we've had, you've done a huge overview of a lot of the programs, but we've got some specifics on some of them. Some you've touched on. So what are some of the requirements for instance, the wage subsidy, and is it easy to apply?
I've heard that it's easy to apply. I haven't applied myself. I've heard the application process is pretty seamless. The major piece is the 70 or 30% revenue and proving that, right? And being able to back that up. That's kind of the biggest inhibitor for a lot of businesses, where you're sitting there going, do I qualify? Do I not? And then obviously the fact that it's ongoing makes it a little bit more cumbersome, as opposed to just, hey, you've been approved and you can expect X amount over the next, few months. I think that specific program may be more of an accountant's question. Your accountant would probably be more on the assistance in terms of that, more valuable. We've certainly talked to people about it, but and obviously, CRA as a resource as well.
CRA has also done a few things quickly that have lightened the load. So if you didn't have a proper CRA account for your business, or don't have the PIN access or whatever, instead of going online and trying to do it and wait a week for the mail out, get on the phone. If you can get on the phone, they'll actually do it through email and speed up the process so that you can get going on it. They've kind of taken some of those big prohibitive factors out of the way. The problem is right now is I know people are sitting 6 and 7 and 8 hours on the phone trying to get through. So again, it's patience, but this is the first week of rollout. Things tend to mellow out after a couple of days, and it sort of gets the system rolling. So, okay, the wage subsidy, also the other part that has come up is there's the 10% that right now a lot of people have applied for through various things like ADP and other things if they use payroll companies. That, just to be clear to everybody, that does not, you can't have the 10% and the 75%. If you apply for the 75%, they're going to ask you if you're already receiving the 10%, and they'll take it off the 75% that you're getting. So you total max will be 75, whether you get which program you're going with, just to be clear.
Yeah, but you can apply. If you've done the 10%, you still can apply for the 75%. You're just only going to get 65%. Of it.
Yeah, definitely. But there was some question on that as well. So what other options are available to small businesses that per se don't qualify for the emergency loan or BDC? I think you touched on it a little bit in deal with your own finance officer, whoever you're dealing with, but have you seen anything else out there that might be helpful to the small business owners that don't quite fit?
Yeah, certainly the first call I would say to anyone is call your own banker. Call whoever has been managing your account, or if you haven't had any specific person, then call the branch manager and they'll put you in touch with someone. Most of the banks have small business lending programs. The response time can vary, obviously, and each bank has their own things. There are certainly some banks that are better than others at doing it. Obviously, like I touched, the $40,000 loan, if I was in need, that's the first thing I would apply for. It's quick, it's seamless, it's easy, and 25% of it is forgivable if you repay it. So, and it's interest free for almost a year, more than a year and a half. So that would be the first thing that I can do. BDC, outside of the COVID programs, they do have a unsecured small business lending program. Most of the applications up to $100,000. It approves based on credit score, personal net worth, and it's all online. If you literally just Google BDC online application, it pops up. through that same portal, I believe there's a toggle down that says COVID, and that's how you would apply for the COVID one as well. So pretty simple to get to. And business owners can access up to $100,000 just purely online. It can approve. I will warn, like, caution, like there's backlogs in that. It just goes unfortunately through the same approval process as all the COVID stuff. So it is pretty backed up. A lot of business owners right now are turning to, using their houses and using their personal assets to inject money into the businesses and stuff. Not obviously a situation that everybody wants to be in or wants to be doing, but it's another option that may be cheaper and quicker than doing it. I saw another question was that, can you get unsecured or non-collateral? And this is pretty well the same answer there. It's through the BDC and through your own bank. A lot of business owners will say unsecured because their real estate isn't tied by it, or it's not tied to a specific piece of equipment. Most banks, including BDC, they'll still take what's called a GSA, or a general security agreement, which effectively is kind of like an umbrella charge over your business assets. So even though there's no fixed hard security like real estate or equipment, there may be receivables that are outstanding. There may be some inventory. There may be, other small assets in the business, and banks will lend against that stuff. So most of the programs go up to $500,000 through the banks, where they'll give you, whether it's a line of credit or a term loan, through your own bank, up to $500,000. And a lot of business owners consider that unsecured. That they will take a general security agreement over the encompassing business, and likely a personal guarantee from shareholders. But that is an option as well.
Great. Are you seeing assistance for any, okay, we sort of touched on this, the under 5 employee, the less than 20% payroll?
Yeah, that's kind of the tough part, right? Again, it's mostly triggers to if you're paying dividends, like a lot of businesses fall in that category, right? Ourselves included. But I haven't seen anything. They're working on it. Like you said, the BC and Canadian chambers are advocating hard on everybody's behalf for that. But I haven't. I mean, obviously there's the wage subsidies and those types of things, but no, that I haven't seen any specific loans that are directly geared towards that. Being that anyone less than 20,000 is excluded from the $40,000 loan. You can still apply through the BDC. Obviously that doesn't exclude. It doesn't have anything to do with your payroll. That has more to do with the ongoing cash flow of the business. So you would qualify there irrespective, or potentially qualify irrespective of how much payroll you've got and how you pay yourself or your employees.
I think part of it too is with the payroll structure. If you don't qualify right now, apply 15 days from now. Like if your situation is changing, it's like with the emergency program for individuals. It's changing constantly within the government. So it's changing constantly within the background of CRA and BDC. They are making changes. So if you didn't qualify one week, you may qualify next week. It's like, for instance, the change with the loan, they went from 50 and $1 million to 20 and 1.5. Those changes are taking place. Is that something that you would recommend to people? It's like just reapply?
Oh, for sure. Especially if things are changing, right? If you've things evolve both in how the government's changing things, but also potentially how your business is changing, right? And that applies obviously to the wage subsidy. That's why they're doing it in 15-day increments. And if things change where all of a sudden you qualify 100%, but also keep checking in. Another question that was brought up is, where do I go to get my information? I've been pretty diligent. 8 a.m. typically is when Trudeau's stepping on his podium, I guess you call it, outside his house or wherever he may be. And, I try to be on that as often as possible. And if not, I'm certainly Googling, but both provincial, federal websites are obviously very reliable. I mean, be careful where you're Googling to make sure, those are obviously the most trusted sources. But, the BC Chamber website is fantastic. Our Langley Chamber website has a ton of information and links. Those are the sources that I'm going to, on a regular basis, especially if I miss the address by Trudeau in the morning. But everything, if you Google, wage subsidy program, every large accounting firm has their own take on it and their own brochures and everything, and which obviously can be, relied upon. And then obviously the direct federal, provincial, and supporting chamber websites are a great resource as well.
So somebody mentioned in one of the questions, it would be very helpful to clearly separate relief programs that are grants from those that eventually have to be repaid. And I know that, like you said, there is some grant applications out there through, I believe it's Procurement Canada, more so than through programs. Is there like, there isn't a grant page anywhere, is there?
Yeah, no, there's no specific grant page specifically related to COVID. That said, I don't know. I mean, everybody, has different accountants. I have been in conversations with a number of accountants that have specific government program, whether it's tax-related refunds or, grants, et cetera. There are a number of grants that are not just COVID related, and this is, I will caveat, this is not my expertise by any means, but there are lots and lots of different grants that were available prior. I mean, even like the shred claim, if somebody is retooling their factory and doing something innovative that wasn't done before, you'd potentially qualify for shred claims. So I would first, if you Google grants, there are certainly some out there, but my call would be to my accountant. And if my accountant is just more of a regional local accountant, which is very common, I would then ask maybe my accountant for, hey, do you have a reference or somebody that you work with frequently at one of the major firms that has a specific person that does this on a day-to-day basis? I've spoken to many that's all they do is all day long, pre-COVID, post-COVID, all they do is work with businesses to get grants, to get, funding through different programs. And there are some out there. You spoke of the procurement ones. There's the Next Gen and Gen, where if you're retooling or buying new equipment or doing something specifically related to COVID, they're funding 100% of it, and that's a grant. It's obviously a lot of the problem with grants is they're first come, first serve. And, as sad as it is, we're just about through April, and a lot of those funds have dried up, right? By this time of year, every year, the funds dry up. So it is important to get on it. But yeah, I would call your local accountant first. And if they have somebody to recommend, then 100%. Otherwise, reach out to Colleen and the chamber. We've got most of the major accounting firms are members of ours, and we've got people that we can certainly connect you to that can 100% help you and answer all the questions you need.
Perfect. So what amounts, one of the questions was, what amounts can we apply for? Are they subject to the same scrutiny as usual working capital loans? You've touched on this. They're looking at things lighter these days.
Yeah. So if we speak specifically to the BDC one, what I've been told and what we've seen, actually go through and get approved, the BDC program that was originally announced where it said, hey, we're putting $10 billion, go apply for working capital loans through BDC, and there's specific COVID related loans. When you toggle down on the menu, it says COVID, they are funding up to 6 months of your fixed costs. So you literally will have to produce, from March through 6 months to September of 2019, these were my fixed costs. These are the ones that I'm not paying anymore because I've laid people off or done whatever, but these are my remaining fixed costs for the next 6 months. That's what BDC is funding, the true costs fixed through that program. Banks are still open though. Like the one thing that, everybody's flushing to BDC, and we've talked to some account managers at different banks that are going like, yeah, we're not busy. We're not getting that many. We're getting existing client referrals and this and that. And then we're reaching out to our customers and they're saying, oh, we're applying through BDC because we heard all this news about it. And they're going, well, we could do it for you. And in some cases, your existing bank can do it cheaper, right? And in most cases, faster, because BDC is just so backlogged right now.
Right.
They've got so many applications going through. I just recommend everyone talk to your banker first. And, this is one of those times where maybe I say this like bias being an ex-banker, but the relationship of client to banker sometimes is overlooked, at the importance of it, that banker is there to support your business, in good times and bad. And it's important having that, good relationship with your banker, whether it means a call every quarter to let them know how things are going, or him or her know how things are going, or, more frequent or less frequent. It's important to have that continued contact. But yeah, that would be the top of that. Okay.
So one of the questions and I've heard this a lot, our team, as we're phoning members, are hearing this as well. So why would a business want to go into debt when they're not sure what the outcomes are going to be and where they're going to be at this point? And do they have to claim the debt personally, or are they able to put it and do it to the business? I know it's going to depend on how they've done their accounting, for starters, But any sort of crystal ball ideas on that one?
Yeah, no, I've been asked that a lot. Debt is tough, right? Because debt has to be repaid, and it's like right now the government is going into massive amounts of debt, right? To fund all these things, and same with us as taxpayers. We're taking relief now, and we're naive if we don't think we're going to be repaying it by way of higher taxes. Maybe not everyone's taking it, but everybody's going to be repaying it, right? That in itself is debt.
Yeah.
I think debt is a good thing if you can accurately or, with some reasonable probability predict that things are going to get better and that you're going to be able to take it off. There is a lot of opportunity out there. It's got to be the coolest thing about, this whole negative situation is all the different ways I've seen businesses pivot, change, do these unique things, open up new revenue channels, work in different ways where they're finding ways to not only get by right now, but in some cases do even better. And certainly, it's not true with everyone. There are businesses where, you rely on people coming in and out of the door, restaurants and hospitality. And if that's not happening, it's tough. And if you're sitting in a situation where you cannot reasonably, be confident that things are going to improve in a timely manner to the point where you're going to be able to repay this loan and get back on track, then maybe it is not a good time to borrow. Maybe it's a time to pivot in a totally different direction, whether that means changing your business where you don't have to borrow or opening a new business and borrowing for that reason. Right. It's definitely historically a very, very, very cheap time to borrow. When you talk about, interest rates, sometimes below 3%, that's insanely cheap historically. And for sure, if you can, with some reasonable confidence, prove that you're going to come through this and you're going to do it, then borrowing is a good thing, right? It's certainly better than closing the doors.
Yeah.
In terms of limiting your liability personally, if you're incorporated, it does that a little bit. But in times like this, even if you're incorporated, especially if the business owner is a true influential piece of the business, then the bank's going to get a personal guarantee anyways. Right. Now, there are certain things that are limited from that, and that's not always the case. But banks are always saying, hey, we're willing to take your word for it and your history and, your projections and what you're planning on doing. And we're willing to give you the $500,000 to do it, but you need to put your name behind it too, right? We're going to do it for you at 3.5 or 4.5 or whatever percent, where people always forget the banks go buy that money too. It's not like they're sitting on billions and trillions of dollars in vaults that they lend out. They're borrowing, they're leveraged more than any of us. So they go buy that money and then lend it out to us, and their spread before paying for bricks and mortar and salaries and this and that, maybe 1.5%. And I always ask customers, I'm like, would you lend your money to somebody that's doing this business venture for 1.5% return if you weren't 100% confident they were going to repay it? And the answer is always no, right? So as a business owner, we kind of have to ask ourselves that too, right? And that's why if I kind of tell people that, by all means, as a business, we always fight for our clients to have personal guarantees removed and all those things. They provide peace. Not having your house or anything like that on the line definitely provides peace of mind and whatever. And I believe you can still, as a business owner, put your money where your mouth is and back it up by, reducing dividends or doing other sorts of things to still give that bank confidence. And we are always fighting for that. But at the same time, so there are certain situations in this, the market today would 100% be one of them where the bank is saying, listen, we're willing to bet on you, but we need you to bet on yourself. And if you don't have the confidence to put your own money on the line, the bank's likely not going to do it themselves, right? But yeah, being incorporated protects yourself if in certain ways. If you're a sole proprietor and you are the business, any money you borrow, whether it's corporate, commercially, or personally, you're liable for it. And by all means, anytime you borrow, even if it's in a corporation, and if you're putting your name behind it as a personal guarantor, and certainly if you're putting your house on the line, and then yeah, you're liable for it. So you'd of course you want to be pretty darn sure, at least darn sure as you can be in times like this, that you're going to find a way to make it work.
Right. Well, one of the things that's come out of this conversation for me today is a reminder to business people to have your professionals in place. have a relationship with your banker, have that conversation with your accountant. And if you don't have one, I highly recommend you get one. And have your lawyer around for making sure that you've gone the right direction for most of these things. I'd like to now, we've gone through the questions that we had prepared and had received. So I just wanted to open it up to the chat box if anybody would like to enter any kind of a question in there if we didn't cover off on something. Happy to take those questions now. Brad, did you have anything to add while we're waiting on a question?
I mean, I keep telling people that focus on the positive. It's a real easy time to be negative for everyone, right? There's not many businesses that we talk to that haven't been negatively impacted by this. I mean, the positive silver lining is that we're in it. We're all in it together, both locally, regionally, provincially, federally, globally. You know, everybody's going through this. And there are, you know, I'd echo what you said, lean on the resources available. There are, you know, I'm in conversation with accountants and lawyers and, you know, my colleagues and bankers, and everybody right now is saying, like, today is the best day to fill the Goodwill Bank. I'll give as much free information. You feel good helping people regardless, right? So take advantage of it. People will answer the phone and they'll be glad to take your call, and use the chamber as a resource. If you don't have, you know, an accountant to call, or a lawyer to call, or, you know, a professional to call your you know, the local chamber, and we can point you in the right direction. If we can't answer the question ourselves, then by all means, yeah, we can point you to the direction. And I mean, I should caveat, I don't know, people, I'm the president of the chamber. That's why I say we. I didn't say that at the beginning.
So actually we have a question in the chat box. For the CEBA, does the applicant business have to actually show how they intend to use the 40K?
No, there's just a declaration. So there's one big piece of the application. It does say, these are the ineligible things, not limited to these things. These are the eligible uses of the funds. And it specifically says, do you intend to use it for these eligible, blah, blah, blah. You will not use it for the ineligible.
Yeah,
thing.
you're not
so
going
you don't
to
have to prove it. It's like a 5-minute process, you know. Okay. You go online through your bank, you click it, you put in, you know, your business details. It just, a lot of them will auto load, but if they don't, then they load in. It says, these are what it's used for. Have you been impacted by COVID? Will you be using it for some of these acceptable or other acceptable uses? You confirm you will not be using it for these specific uses. You push yes, and you get an approval effectively. It'll say your application has been processed, and then the banks themselves, because they're administering them, and yeah, even though EDC and the government is guaranteeing them, if there's errors in the applications and stuff, it does fall to the institution. So they do have somebody then that's dedicated to looking at each of the applications, making sure that the declarations were filled out properly, probably confirming that the business was actually doing their own search to confirm that you actually were in business as of March 1st, I believe it is, of this year, and then it goes through. So you don't have to prove anything. You don't have to upload any documents or not, at least through everyone that I've talked to. I haven't talked to somebody who has gone through the process with every single bank and credit union, but I have talked to people who've gone through with the majority of them, and no one's had to provide any actual supporting information for it.
So one of the loopholes that came up in another conversation about that was small proprietors that are actually not using bank business accounts. They're using their own personal accounts or a personal account because it's cheaper monthly for statements and stuff like that. So have you run across that one? Yeah,
I would encourage, like, if it's a fee thing, there are lots of business bank accounts out there that are free. So do the research there by all means. Sole proprietors should, by law, you have to use a business account, I should say.
I know.
You sign a declaration when you open a personal account that you're not using it for business purposes. But if you are a sole proprietor and it's smaller, there's a little bit of a gray area there. It's tougher because the portal is through business accounts. The other tough part, which comes up, is that the loan is designed to be provided by your primary financial institution for business banking. So even though some banks honestly have quicker, more seamless processes, you're supposed to do it through your primary. That's one of the declarations, is that this institution is my primary business bank. So if you're a sole proprietor, it doesn't mean you can't open a bank account at a new institution that is a commercial bank. You can obviously call your business or your branch and say, hey, this is my situation. And I'd be in times like this, I'd be very, very surprised if your institution isn't able to work around it. Whether they'd say, oh, we've got to open you up a business account actually in order to process it through. That I believe, I'm not 100% sure, but I believe the deposit has to go into a business account. So
Right.
they'll likely have to open up.
Yeah,
you'll have to open up an account and get on the high fees, I guess. But there are a lot of options there. And even a lot of people don't know that most banks, I mean, the credit unions have very favorable no fee policies and whatnot for existing members. But even the banks, they've all got different plans. And if you're a small business, they have a small business plan and a medium business and 20 transactions and 50 and 100. And a lot of them have minimum balance waivers. And if you have lending, then it's free. There's lots of different options for bank accounts too. So again, I'd encourage call your banker and see what options they've got to rectify potentially a wrong before and get yourself onto a good business account that works for you.
And I know that everybody's doing it differently. So for instance, RBC, I believe, is treating it as a credit card application. You basically get a $40,000 credit card. Here you go once you're through the process, because that was the quickest, most easiest platform for them to go with. So yeah, again, like you said, everybody's different. Again, having that conversation with your bank is definitely the way to start. Yeah,
and the federal government, I mean, them coming out and saying, we're trusting the banks to administer these loans. Everybody's doing them differently. Some are faster than others. Some of them had their portals open in 2 days. Some of them took 2 weeks. The majority, if not all, are up and running, and they're all doing it differently. But the net of it is that you get $40,000 and it's guaranteed by the government. And if you repay it, and there's actually a little bit of a gray area on how that repayment works too, because you get $40,000. Do we just have to pay it down to $30,000? And if the balance is at $30,000, or sorry, if the balance is at $10,000, so pay down 30, then do we get it forgiven, or do we have to pay it all off and then they send us a check back for $10,000? Like, there's some gray area there that just hasn't come out. But the net of it is that, yeah, if you advance the money today and you're in a position to repay it all by December 31st, 2021, that $10,000 is forgiven, and in the time from now until then, it's interest free. So yeah, I think it's a good program, and like I said, it has to be done through your existing bank.
Great. Any further questions? There hasn't been anything else popped up in the chat box. If not, I will thank everybody for attending today. Brad, thank you again for your time. And as more things roll out, we may have you back for another conversation on
no, certainly.
Particular items. I would recommend, if anybody has any questions regarding, major financing and you're not having success with your bank, give Ashdown Capital a call. Brad and his team can give you a hand. Thank you to everybody for attending today. Brad, thanks again very much. And we hope everybody's doing well, and we'll see you all soon. Thanks very much.
Thanks, everyone.